A new beginning for Sinclair Fine Foods. The sound of crystal glasses clinking filled the private dining room of Ellsworth, one of the most luxurious restaurants in Boston. Laughter and cheerful voices echoed around the table as a celebration unfolded. At the head of the table, Edward Kingston, a lead investor from Meridian Capital, raised his glass with excitement, his eyes filled with approval. "To Sinclair Fine Foods and our exciting new chapter," he announced, his voice warm and confident. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. After months of meetings, negotiations, and endless discussions, I had finally done it. An $8 million investment. It was the biggest milestone yet for my family's specialty food business, a dream that had started as a small shop but was now on its way to becoming a national brand. The champagne flowed freely, glasses sparkled under the soft lighting, and the room was filled with an atmosphere of celebration. Investors smiled. My parents looked happier than I had seen them in years, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe, to truly enjoy the moment. My name is Madison Sinclair. 8 years ago, I made a decision that shocked everyone. I walked away from a high-paying finance career, a job that promised stability, wealth, and status, to save my parents' struggling gourmet food shop. Back then, the store was barely staying afloat, just months away from shutting down. People thought I was crazy for giving up my six-figure salary for a business that was sinking fast. But where others saw a lost cause, I saw an opportunity. As I sipped my champagne, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "I remember when your parents' shop was just a tiny storefront in Cambridge," said Vivian, my former business school professor. She had been the one to introduce me to these investors, opening doors I wouldn't have been able to reach on my own. "And now look at what you've built: national distribution, an online subscription model, manufacturing partnerships. It's truly remarkable, Madison." A warm glow spread through me as I met her eyes. I had worked tirelessly to make this happen, from rebranding our products to restructuring operations, from securing valuable partnerships to building an e-commerce platform from scratch. It had been a long and exhausting road. But now, Sinclair Fine Foods was no longer just a small neighborhood shop. It was a growing national brand, with our specialty jams and artisanal condiments reaching homes in 48 states. None of this would have been possible without Madison's vision, my father said, raising his glass with pride. His eyes shone with admiration. "When Helen and I started this business 25 years ago, we never imagined it could become something this big." My mother, Helen, sat beside him, nodding with a gentle smile, but as I looked at her, I noticed something flicker across her face, an emotion I couldn't quite name. It wasn't sadness exactly, but it wasn't joy either. The conversation around the table shifted to expansion plans. I had spent weeks carefully mapping out a strategy for how we would use this new investment, how we would scale our operations, and how we would break into new markets. But as the investors excitedly discussed my ideas, I felt my mother's hand slide into mine under the table. "Madison, dear," she whispered, leaning in close enough that her familiar floral perfume wrapped around me. "This is all very exciting, but remember, when William returns next month, he'll be the best choice to lead Sinclair Fine Foods as CEO. You've done a wonderful job laying the foundation, but he has the right education for this next step." William, my brother, the golden child. He had spent the past year traveling across Europe after finishing his MBA, barely checking in on the business, barely offering any help or input, and yet, in my mother's eyes, he was still the rightful leader of the company, the one who should take over now that I had done the hard work of rebuilding it. I kept my smile in place, though I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. 8 years of sleepless nights, 18-hour workdays, missed vacations, and sacrificed personal time, and still, she saw me as nothing more than a placeholder, someone holding the fort until William was ready to step in and take what she believed was his by birthright. I squeezed her hand gently, then pulled away, lifting my glass higher with a bright, unwavering smile. "Everything okay?" Edward Kingston asked, noticing our quiet exchange. "Absolutely perfect," I said smoothly, my voice betraying nothing. But inside, my mind was already working. This wasn't over. I had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to let it all slip away. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. A bold new path. I knew it wasn't fair, but in my family, fairness was never part of the plan. From the moment I stepped into the family business 8 years ago, there had always been an unspoken rule: no matter what I accomplished, no matter how much I built, no matter how hard I worked, my brother William was the one meant to inherit it all. The truth had been there all along, lingering in the background like a shadow I couldn't outrun. And now, as I sat in a boardroom with my investors, people who had bet $8 million on my leadership, I was finally ready to face it head-on. Across the table, Diane Thomas, one of our key investors, flipped through the pages of a proposal I had just handed out. She stopped abruptly and frowned. "And what's on page 3? She asked, her voice laced with curiosity. I steadied my breath, feeling my heartbeat quicken. "That's my counterproposal." A silence fell over the room as the investors scanned the document. Page 3 didn't outline a plan for William to step in as CEO. It didn't include my parents or even the Sinclair name at all. Instead, it proposed something entirely different, something I had never spoken aloud until now. Edward Kingston, the lead investor, was the first to react. He set the folder down and studied me carefully. "This is unexpected," he said. "You're suggesting we shift our investment to a new company, one that you would lead?" "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Let me show you why that makes financial sense for everyone involved." I turned to my laptop and clicked through a presentation I had prepared overnight, walking them through my reasoning. "Our customers don't buy from us because of the Sinclair name," I explained, showing them a slide with customer survey results. "They buy because of the product quality, the innovation, and the brand story, every single one of which I built from the ground up." I pointed to the numbers on the screen, detailing how our revenue had grown since I took over. The investors leaned in, listening closely. "Our customers associate our brand with sustainability, with creativity, with community connections," I continued. "These are not legacy elements of my parents' business. These are things I implemented myself." Diane Thomas flipped back through her folder, her sharp eyes scanning the numbers. "What about the manufacturing relationships?" she asked. "Wouldn't you be starting from scratch?" I shook my head, prepared for that question. "Not at all. Our 3 biggest manufacturing partners have contracts up for renewal next quarter. I've handled those relationships personally for years. They know who really runs this business." A few of the investors exchanged glances. I could see the gears turning in their heads, weighing the risk, assessing the opportunity. Kingston leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table. "This is impressive work," he admitted, "and not something you could have thrown together overnight. How long have you been thinking about this?" I hesitated for just a moment, then decided to tell the truth. "About 3 years," I said quietly. "I've always known my parents viewed William as the future of the company. I had to be prepared for the day they tried to push me aside." Another silence filled the room. The weight of my words settled in. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of discussion, Kingston folded his hands together and nodded. "We invested in you, Madison," he said firmly. "Not just the Sinclair brand. There's value in the name, of course, but you're the one who transformed it into what it is today." He glanced at the other investors before adding, "We'll need to do proper due diligence, but I'm inclined to move forward with your proposal, with a few modifications to protect all parties." A wave of relief washed over me, but I kept my face steady. I had been prepared to walk away with nothing if I had to. "Thank you," I said sincerely. Kingston offered me a knowing smile. "There's just one condition," he said. "You need to have an honest conversation with your parents before we finalize anything. Give them a chance to realize what they're about to lose." I stiffened at his words. I didn't want to. I wanted to sign the papers, walk away, and never look back, but I knew he was right. "I'll talk to them tonight," I promised. That evening, I gathered my core team, the people who had worked alongside me for years. I hadn't told them about my contingency plan before. I wasn't sure if they would see it as disloyalty to the Sinclair name. But as I explained my decision, their reactions surprised me. Daphne, my operations manager, crossed her arms and smirked. "I always wondered if you had an exit strategy," she said. "The way your parents talk about William, it was only a matter of time." Jason, our head of sales, nodded. "We've worked with you for years, Madison, not with the Sinclair name." Tamara, our logistics lead, leaned forward. "Are you asking if we'll follow you?" she said, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated. "Would you?" In a heartbeat, Tamara replied. Jason exchanged a glance with Daphne before adding, "We've actually discussed it before. We figured this day might come, especially with William finishing his MBA." Their words settled deep in my chest, warming something inside me that I hadn't realized was frozen. They saw me, they recognized what I had built. Even if my own family never did. Later that night, I drove to my parents' house with a strange sense of calm. For years, I had worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove my worth to them. I had built this company from the ground up, turned it into something they never imagined it could be, and yet, it was never enough. But now, I understood something I hadn't before. No amount of success would change the way they saw me. To them, I would always be the one keeping William's seat warm. As I pulled into their driveway, my phone buzzed. A familiar name flashed across the screen. William. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, Maddie, he said cheerfully, just landed. Mom said something about a big investment. Sounds like the timing of my return couldn't be better. I closed my eyes briefly, then smiled to myself. The timing is perfect, I said smoothly. I'll see you tomorrow at the office. Tomorrow. When everything would change.